Today on Gamers Couch,
Dark Souls. Goodbye.
No, honey. This might not be the shortest video in history of Gamers Couch. I'm sorry. Just because you threaten the audience, this is not nice behavior. It's way better to say hello to the folks. This is Daniel, I'm Sarah. We're talking board games on this show every Sunday. There's a huge playlist both on BGG, the Webpage, and this channel here as well. So roam through all the episodes that we already had if you're so interested. Today we have very Dark Souls as we talk about the Dark Soul games. Such a bad pun too. Before we all die, Daniel's gonna talk about rules and gameplay. We play a few moves. I'm gonna make a very educated and knowledgeable face. Then we talk about what we liked or not liked about this game and have a thumb rating. And last but not least, we will talk about funny stories and experiences before we leave you to the rest of your day. There won't be a teaser for Draw for Initiative because we published, and yes, it was super motherload. You all guessed correctly, very silently, but definitely correctly.
Loud or load?
L-O-D-E or L-O-A-D. Nobody knows the letter.
Actually, that's also what BGG says. Probably also what Steam says to the video game.
What?
Anyway, the game's name is Motherload.
Yeah, I know.
Not Lord.
We have a German, English, whatever accent.
There's a problem with translation, reception, accents. Anyway, Dark Souls.
Exactly. He's pushy today. Let's start, hubby. Since you're so eager to talk and take over the show, do your job and tell the folks rules and gameplay while I sip my tea.
Welcome to the world of Dark Souls. The Souls games made its way to the board gaming, and now we have a board game called Dark Souls that tries to, I think, reimagine the video game as a board game. In this, you will cooperatively try to fight through hordes of monsters in hopes to get better, collect souls, get better equipment, and then fight a mini-boss or a mid-level boss, and then continue the same until you might be able to take on one of the main bosses.
And now I quickly have to pause you because the sun's coming out. Who can think about that at 7 p.m. and it screws up our lighting.
It's not only 7 p.m., it's also Germany, which is very untypical for sun coming out.
Yes. And it's Friday night. It's not the usual Saturday.
It had an entire summer to not come out, and now when summer is ending, it decides...
And I need some consistent light. It's screwing with us. I'm gonna screw you back, dear son. I'm gonna make things dark, because I can. It's Dark Souls, after all. No sun allowed in these halls of gaming. Now, continue.
So we set up not a board representative because this is also a game that will claim not only your table, your kitchen, your living room, and maybe also parts of the garage in terms of setup, but it is a little bit bigger. Typically, you will have your bonfire tile, which is essentially your main base of operations. And I actually forgot something.
You can talk. I'm not gonna cut. What you need? I'm cutting.
Machen wir mal einen Cut, ne?
Mhm.
Ich habe die komplett vergessen auszupacken. Die kannst du direkt auf den Tisch ausgeben.
Ja, aber erstmal muss ich es rüber transportieren.
Komisches passiert, wenn ich nicht das Setup mache. Ganz komisch, da fehlen Marker. Dann sind die Lichter ganz böse und wollen uns ärgern, weil ich nicht den Pups der Angst hier hinterlassen habe. Oh, warte, hier ist noch eine Falle.
Ja, ich habe Fallen habe ich nicht aufgebaut. Ich habe extra eine genommen, die keine Falle hat.
Okay.
Den Gargoyle brauche ich noch.
Ja.
Okay. You've got your bonfire tile here, which is essentially your base of operations. It contains a stack of loot cards that you might be able to get. You can store your souls, which you will get for defeating encounters with enemies.
Mine's already there.
And most importantly, you also have your spark dial here, which are pretty much the lives of your group. Whenever one of you dies, you all spawn back on this space and reduce the spark dial by 1. If it ever reaches 0, you have lost the game. And yes, you heard that correctly. It is entirely enough for one of the group to die and to have everybody respawn. Now, the game itself has essentially almost two phases. One is getting to the boss, and then the boss itself. Getting to the boss means you have to fight through a couple of these tiles, and I just put one down here for reference to show you how these work, but they are all very similar. They all have this note grid on them. They all have an encounter card associated with them, which we'll flip in a second to see what's actually on here. And you'll arrange 4 of these to explore, and the one that's the furthermost gets this fork door. For if you played the video game, is essentially showing you, well, if you beat everybody in here and go through that fork door, you will end up in the boss room and then fight the boss. Having an encounter, you would flip over this card. These cards get drawn at random at the start of the game based on what the boss tells you that you're fighting. So we decided for this to check out the gargoyle, and the gargoyle says of the 4 tiles that are on here, 3 will get level 1 encounters, this is a level 1 encounter, and 1 level 2 encounter, and the rest we'll get to once we get to the boss. But that's sort of his domain, so he defines what will be set up. Looking at the card, this tells us which enemies are spawning on which area. So here we have on the sword, we have an undead hollow and an hollow archer, and also a silver knight on the cross swords. Also, there's sometimes terrain on here. We get a treasure chest and also a barrel. The treasure chest goes onto this thing here, and the barrel goes into that. Now, these are first and foremost obstacles that are in your way and block just your movement. There's nothing here that ever blocks line of sight. This is a very abstracted sort of movement thing, so don't expect something like Descent or any other game that has the little grid. These nodes are the only spots you can move and attack on. Now, since we are coming from the bonfire part, we can decide on which of these 3 nodes we want to stand. Since we are only 2, there's no restrictions that apply, but there's one general restriction in that never it is allowed to have more than 3 models on the same node. If the 4th one is coming, it just pushes one of the existing here out, and you can optimally decide who's that going to be. But if an enemy comes to a space with 2 heroes and another enemy, you can have whatever one of you pushed out and so on. The game itself is played then once the encounter starts. So we have settled on where we want to start, and then
We have to start in that row.
yes, we have to start on the side where the entrance is that we were coming from. That could mean that sometimes you can decide where to go depending on how much you explored. If you have if there would be a tile here which we already explored and that is accessible through some other means, we could decide which side to enter the room. Which, in case of here, it is quite unfortunate to start here because you're already directly in the enemy's face, and I have bad news. They start every encounter with their first turn, so actually where we are is still pretty good. I totally forgot to tell you who we are, so maybe we should do that now. There are 4 characters in the game.
Yours is visible.
I have the assassin here, which which is a quite mobile character that has not as much armor to defend brute force attacks, but he's pretty good to roll out of the way.
He's dodging real good.
Yep.
And I am the herald. I also have white markers. One is stuck there, the others sit there. Due to camera filming things, I'm off frame.
Yes.
But I'm just as cool. I look really nice in my armor suit. And I am a range attack character. That's what I'm good for.
To give you a quick overview what these character boards are all about, well, your character comes with some starting equipment, and that's what we have on here, these little cards, and these are always the same for each for the class respectively, which give you something to use and defend yourself with. You also have a special ability that is character specific that you can use once per spark, meaning that if I use this up, this gets flipped over to indicate that I've used the special ability, and then I can only use it after we either died or decided to rest at the bonfire. Both would reduce our sparks by 1. We also got 1 lucky coin, which we can flip to re-roll 1 die if need be. Again, same principle, only once per spark. We got an Estus flask, which will heal a character. Again, only once per spark. This is a place where we can put this Ember token, which is a special item you can get during the game, which makes you a little bit more resilient against very strong attacks. And last but not least, we have our stats here. These are slightly different for each character, different numbers, but they all serve the very same purpose. These have only influence on what you're doing insofar as that they determine what equipment you may equip. You can purchase higher tiers with souls, and the costs get a little bit higher with that. But let's say if I put more into strength, now I can carry weapons that have a strength of 25 or lower requirement there. And looking at the equipment cards, you can see they all have this little box here. So, for example, the S-stock can be used as long as you have at least a dexterity of 14. Some things don't have any requirements, like this target shield. Other things have requirements in multiple areas. The better the equipment, the higher the requirements. And that's the only purpose of these stats here. Below the stats is your life bar, so to speak. So this is something that will get filled up by wounds you're taking and by stamina you're using, which is, so to speak, your currency or your action points that you can spend on certain actions. For example, the S-stock has a base attack with 2 dice, but if I spend 3 stamina, I get a 1 die more. And for that, the game comes with a couple of these little cubes, and you're supposed to fill that up. Black cubes are for stamina. So if I would use my S-stock, I would just put 3 black cubes in here. And red cubes are wounds, and wounds start on the other side, so you would start filling up like this. If at any point ever this entire bar is filled with cubes, and it doesn't matter if they're black or red, you die, and then everybody goes back to the camp and resets, or turns down the spark wheel by 1. So you gotta be quite strategic on how you want to spend your stamina, how close do you want to get to the edge, so, literally in this case, to dying. And while it's quite easy to regain stamina, for example, every character regains 2 automatically at the start of their turn, it is much more difficult to get rid of wounds unless you have something like a heal spell or
the flask.
Or any other things. Yes, the Estus flask does get rid of all the cubes that are in here, but you have to use it on your turn. So sometimes in this game you end up with... can I wait until it's my turn next time, or will I be dead by then? If you are lazy like me, instead of using...
Efficient. It's called efficient.
Instead of using 1 cube per space, which is visually a little bit nicer, just for speed's sakes and for fiddly bit's sakes, we will just be using 2 cubes here now and just moving them along this thing here. So... That's our characters. We decided where we go. One of us is the starting player, which is usually the player who has to go next. So if we finish this encounter, and I was the last one to strike dead amongst the dead, then Sarah would be the starting player, so she would be the first to have the next turn. Independent of that, we get to decide who is the first one to walk through the door, so to speak, or who will pull aggro if you ever played an MMO. In this case, just because I can, I will say I will draw aggro. Also,
I'm starting.
Also because I'm a little bit more, dodgy rolly than Sarah is.
And I'm. You can pursue. Blah. I cannot talk.
Yes.
You have to bring them to me, not too close, just a bit, so I can fire my spear.
We will see.
What was the word? Persuade. Persuade was the word. Sheesh.
And before you're shouting at us through the internet, we're not playing this encounter optimally. It's just to give you an idea how the mechanics of the game work. So if you start an encounter, the enemies go first always, which is kind of quite annoying. So let's take a look at what these enemies are doing. For that, we get out the enemy's behavior cards. Which look like this. I will put them next to here so you get a chance to mildly see a blurry version of that. Each of these cards has a priority number here. The higher the number, the earlier the guy moves. And then it tells you what to do. So in this case, the Silver Knight Swordsman starts first. By the way, these guys all have 1 health point, so as soon as we do 1 point of damage to them, they're gone. And this is read from left to right. So this says he will go 2 spaces forwards towards the closest character. We're both close. A tiebreaker, and this would be the aggro token. And then there's another tiebreaker if that's not possible, which isn't super important. So he goes 2 spaces forward. So he will just go 1, 2 nodes closer to us. Nodes are adjacent as soon as they are literally adjacent. So to us, this node is as adjacent as this diagonal node is. So it's not about actual space covering. It's more like, okay, which other nodes are next to us. Then he will attack someone in range 0, so on his own node with a damage value of 5, and also push them away, and also will attack everybody on that space. Since nobody's there, nothing happens. But this gives you an idea how this works. Every enemy has his moved programming, and we will see how that works out. So the Hollow Soldier moves forward only 1 space. So he joins the Silver Knight there and does the same, would do 4 damage to the character who is closest, but only has a range of 0 as well. Last but not least, we have the Crossbow Hollow, who is pretty much the prick of the series, who is not targeting the nearest player. So instead of this circle, there's the skull here, and the skull means targets the player who has aggro. So me in this case. And also, this means move one away from the one who has aggro. So he essentially moves to a node that is further away from me, although that is kind of self-explanatory, but if in doubt, you get to decide. And then he attacks with a range of infinite, so he will hit me from the other side of the room with 3 damage, which brings us to how do you avoid damage? Well, since I have some bit of armor, I can try to roll the die and just, take it on the chin like a champ, which would mean I get to roll 1 black die. I hope you can see this. Equipment has 2 values here. This one with the shield is physical defense, and the one with the circle is magical defense. These swords and shield icons mean physical attack. This means magical attack. In my case, it doesn't matter because I have a black die for either of them. So my option would be either to block it, which would mean I get to roll this die, which has at worst 1 face with nothing on it, and at best 2 faces with 2 assaults on them, and then I just reduce that from the damage. So I would, if I roll a 2, I would just take 1 damage. Alternatively, I have on my equipment this icon here, which means I can try to dodge, and I actually have it on the shield and on the armor, so I get 2 dice to dodge. If I want to dodge, I am taking a risk. I'm taking the risk of hopefully throwing the die away. Now, if you want to dodge, you spend 1 stamina. So that's the first bigger cost associated with that. Then you get to relocate, which I will do by moving to an adjacent node. You don't have to, you can relocate. And then you get to dodge. And the enemy here has another icon, and this is the amount of dodge symbols I must roll to successfully avoid this attack. Now, the dodge dice have a 50-50 chance of having the dodge symbol, so I'm rolling. And I have 1 dodge symbol, so my dodge was successful. If I would have failed that, I would have gotten the full 3 damage without any reductions, which is quite painful. So that's one of the bigger decisions you've got to make every turn once you attack. Do you want to risk getting a lot of damage, or do you want to risk getting a little bit of damage? Some classes or some characters are more tanky and lend themselves to blocking rather than dodging. But the assassin, as the name almost implies, is a shifty character that can mostly shift out of the way when it's all about damage.
He's a dodgy character.
Yes. Now, these 3 guys have all activated, which brings us to us, and it's Sarah who said she wants to go first.
Whom of the 2 is the bigger jerk?
The Silver Knight Swordsman is the more dangerous guy.
Well, then I'm gonna target him.
So the Silver Knight has a physical defense of 2 and a magical defense of 1.
I would go with the black die plus 1.
Okay. Maybe I should explain to the fine folks what are your options at all if it's your turn as a player. Well, turns out it's quite simple. You can move or you can attack. And or move. Well, not and, but or. So you've got 1 move and 1 attack, or 1 attack action. Actually, that's not quite correct. You can move, and you've got 1 attack action per weapon that you are holding. Meaning, if you're holding 2 one-handed weapons, you get to attack twice if you wish so. You can decide if you want to attack first and move later, or move first and attack later. I guess you will attack first.
Yes, please, because he's in perfect position.
Can I steal that from you?
You can borrow it. So, no stealing.
So Sarah is attacking with the spear, and the spear has a range of 1. That's the symbol up here. That means she can attack the guys on that node without actually being on that node. if she is not spending any stamina, she can roll 1 black die. And when I said that he has a physical resistance of 2, that wouldn't help much because 1 black die has at best 2 swords on it. Also, the spear, since it is an unwieldy weapon, it cannot attack guys on the same spot. That's what the other symbol here is. But if Sarah instead is spending 3 stamina, which I assume she does,
I did.
she gets a black die plus 1. So if she rolls 2 swords, she would be able to kill the Silver Knight. Let's hope she's successful. She's not. So now she gets to move. Movement also has an option there. By the way, when Sarah's turn started, she automatically gets the aggro token. You can always move 1 space for free, and if you want to move an additional space, you get to pay stamina for it. But you can do that as much as you want, which is called then running. You want to stay there?
They move 1 spot, right?
They move on your space and will
My
attack you.
space. Well then, my space. I'm
you're
gonna go
spending
here.
An additional stamina?
And I'm staminaing.
Okay. And now we go through the enemies. Yes, it's 1 player, and then all the enemies go again.
Because they are petty.
And now you see why I said, well, sometimes at the end of your turn, do you still want to use your Estus Flask? Will you come back? Will it go around to you once more, or will they have slaughtered you? So quickly, the Silver Knight Swordsman actually moves 2, so he goes 1 here and then goes to the closest, and in case of a tie, like now, goes to the one with the aggro token, and then attacks for 5 physical.
Now I have 2 black dice, and that is 3, so I take 2.
Yes. Also, this symbol means Sarah gets moved or pushed by
He's pushy.
by the.
I want to go here, please.
Okay, so Sarah gets pushed here. She cannot get pushed onto the treasure chest or the no, also not the barrel because these
can
block
only
block her way. You can dodge onto a barrel, but that costs an additional stamina and then breaks the barrel. Okay, there was a Silver Knight. Hollow Soldier just walks 1 closer to us, is not in range to do anything, and the Crossbow Hollow moves 1 further away from the one with the aggro token, which is Sarah in this case, and then attacks for 3 magical.
Magical, I got 1 black, or do I want to dodge?
It's a 1 die, 1 dodge success to avoid the...
Let's go with the black ones. I'm not really good with the green ones, so that's 1 Whedon's means 2 more damage.
Okay.
Yes.
And thus starts my turn. At first, I get to recover 2 stamina, which brings me down to I'm very fresh again. And now the question is, do I try to kill the Silver Knight, or do I run up to our crossbow guy, who is currently doing more and more damage to us? So I think I'll just go to the crossbow guy. I'm going 1, 2, 3, 1 free move, so I got to spend 2 stamina to get there. And then I'm doing an attack. I want to make sure that he dies, so I'm using my 3 stamina attack, so that ramps me up to 5 stamina, and gives me 3 black dice. And I have to reduce the end result by 1. That's 3 points of damage, minus 1 gives 2, and he has 1 point of shielding, so that's 1 health point. He's out of the game.
Bye.
And now we only have to take care of the other 2. In terms of options or other things one can do, at the beginning of your turn you can rearrange your stuff. Now I don't have anything to rearrange, but Sarah, for example, has a card in her backpack called Talisman, which is also officially treated as a weapon or as a shield, but is essentially a magic item, which gives her the opportunity to recover more stamina per turn. So you can already see the Herald is a class that keeps the distant, pokes a little bit with a stick, and then also has a talisman in the other hand to do some stamina healing. And you can change your equipment at the beginning of your turn. That also includes sometimes you have a 2-handed weapon, and you can put your 2 one-handed weapons onto your back, so to speak, and then equip the 2-handed weapon. That is very much what combat looks like. I mean, this now obviously continues until we either cleared all the enemies, or
They cleared us.
or they killed one of us. If we get killed, or otherwise, if we are successful, we get souls, 2 per player. Oh, I was
showing the souls.
yes.
Yeah, 2 per player.
Okay.
That's 4.
If we
Took
would
a
have
skull instead of
if
soul.
you still have souls and die, you put all the souls from your storage onto the space where you died, and you have to get a character onto that space the next time successfully to recover them, meaning you cannot use them. If that sounds familiar because you played the video game, yes, that is exactly as you would expect it to be. Now, you fight through, let's say, 4 of these encounters, and then you get up to the fog door and can decide if you want to go to defeat the boss. To have a better chance, because the starting equipment is essentially crap, you can use those souls you've gained to either modify your stats and get better to be able to equip better loot. But actually that only makes sense after you've acquired some loot. So to acquire loot, either find these treasure chests, and if you've successfully finished an encounter, you flip them over and get 2 free cards from the treasure deck here. And those just go into your inventory, so you never really lose any items. Unfortunately, these don't respawn. So, but I'll talk about respawning in a second. So, for example, there's the worker armor, which requires somebody to have 12 in every stat to wear it. So I actually couldn't wear it.
I could just upgrade intelligence. Oh no, 12, you said. Forget it. Yeah. Math is difficult.
But Sarah could do that. So upgrading from base to tier 1 costs 2 souls. So if Sarah would upgrade both
dexterity and intelligence, I would be able to carry this,
and then could get this piece of armor,
yeah.
Which is
I cannot do that with almost souls only.
No, I was just highlighting. So this is marginally better. Actually, it's only better in one aspect. It has the same stats as Sarah's armor, but this here has 2 at the last symbol, and that is upgrade slots. So there's parts of the treasure deck that are upgrades that can be either attached to armor or a weapon to make it better or give it additional effects. Another way to get treasure is to buy it straight, and that is by spending a soul for flipping one of these cards and purchasing them. And you pretty much do that until you find something that either strikes your fancy or is at least close to something you can reach with your stats. But that is usually what you would be doing. You would try to get equipment first, then get an idea what is usable, and then start moving towards it, collecting souls to upgrade your stats. Because, as I said, tier 1 upgrade costs 2 souls, from tier 1 to tier 2, 4, and from 2 to 3, it's 8 souls upgrading. So that is actually the more expensive part of the game. But it has no value at all if you start upgrading before having actually something that you can equip. And some of the equipment stuff is rather, decent in terms of stats, so you can equip it early on. Now, let's say you finished all those 4 encounters, have made a couple of souls. You might already figure out that beating 4 encounters might not be enough to be able to upgrade and purchase enough stuff. So what can you do? Well, you could die, which has the same effect, or you just go to the bonfire and reset it by spending a spark. When you do that, every room that has its encounter card face up gets turned face down again. The stuff on here stays, so the chest stays as an open chest. The barrel, if it was broken, gets flipped back to the correct side, and that means every enemy will be back in this room once you well, go back into the room. I mean, you could leave the card open if you wanted to, but that's always a good indicator of this room has been cleared from enemies, leaving the card face up, or this room has not been encountered yet with the card face down. And yes, it's the same card, so you will face the same enemies in the same constellation as you did before, and you will repeat that a couple of times to grind out more souls in order to buy better weapons. And then hopefully also equip them. Once you think you are good enough or don't have any sparks left that you could spend, it's time to face the boss. As I said, the last of these spaces will have this fork door, and next to that comes the boss tile. So I'm moving these a little bit out to give you a little bit of a better chance to see.
I think we won't need the equipment cards, right?
No, I'm
gonna put them back.
So there's actually two special tiles in the game. One is for a mini boss, which has just the regular skull, and one is for a major boss, which has the skull with a crown. Mini boss just uses one tile. For major bosses, you use these together as one area. So let's assume we camped directly next to the mini boss. Looks familiar, but this works a little bit differently. Again, we would start on the side where the boss, where the door is. The boss always starts on the boss icon, and for this I picked the very simple gargoyle mini boss, which is, I think, pretty much the first thing you will encounter. Now, the gargoyle has its a little card here that says how much life does it have. So it gets a little dial with the life points to count that. It also has told us which the prior encounters are. And this here tells us what its behavior deck is. Well, there are behavior cards for bosses, usually more than what the boss is actually using, so you don't always have the same constellation of cards. And these read themselves very similar to what you've seen from the behavior cards of the regular enemies, but since this has 4 cards, that means the boss is doing 4 different move attack patterns and then keeps repeating that, again trying to be close to the video game. So out of these 5, you would shuffle them, put one aside, and now you have the encounter deck for the boss, which is at the beginning unknown. There are possibilities to find gravestones in the world, which are actually a type of terrain, which lets you take a peek at a couple of cards from the deck to kind of know what you're going in for. But that's pretty much it. I'm leaving them there so that we can when I flip them, we can see them. Again, the boss would start first. I would reveal the first card, and this says Tail Whip. Now, there's something a little bit different about this than in comparison to regular enemies. Mostly because this symbol here is new, and this means that the boss will attack multiple nodes at the same time. So Tail Whip is literally him whipping and looking at this to the right and to the back, so he's doing something like this motion almost, without turning the model, because that's also something different, and attacking every node in front of him. So that would be actually every node that is one space away from his front arc. I hope you can see that. So there's 4 different areas on the plate of this boss, and when he starts, the front arc would be that node and this node, and his side arc. Actually, he's attacking his back and the left side. I should turn the card so that I know what I'm talking about. So he's attacking this, and if there would be nodes back here, he would also attack on them. For 4 damage in range 1. Then he moves away from the character with aggro, and I totally forgot to give one of us aggro, so I will take aggro.
So I will start.
meaning he will turn towards the guy who has aggro and then move back to a node that's further away. We can almost leave him here because I think all nodes would be further away from the character. Bosses are a little bit weird because they only turn at the beginning of their move. So if this card would say, actually, we can see this on another card. Let me first finish my. Let's say I was the first player as well. Then there's also here this little red zone, meaning the boss is weak in that part, and if I'm attacking, I get 1 black die more. I'm going to rush in there and going 1 free, spending 1 stamina to go directly in front of him, and then attacking with my mighty S-Stock and probably not doing any damage because that boss has...
that is the weak zone, right?
2 shields, yes.
Okay.
Since I'm attacking in the weak zone and spending 3 stamina, I totally forgot to reset this and spend 1 for movement. So I'm trying to attack him with my 3 dice -1. That's a pretty good roll. So I make 5 damage. He has a shield of 2, so he would take 3 damage, which brings him down to glorious 22
Life.
No, 23 points of life.
Great.
He's almost dead, guys.
Doesn't take long.
And once again, boss activates. This time he's doing electric breath, which this 0 means he just turns towards the next character, or if I would be standing somewhere else, he would turn towards me so that I'm in his front zone. And then does a magical attack, range 1, which hits me and all the 3 spaces in front of me for 4 magical. I can try to dodge it, but I would need 2
symbols.
2 dodge symbols, exactly, yes. And now his weak side is on this part. You can think of the boss as its own little 4-node structure. So if, actually, I moved you, I'm sorry.
What?
If you can move around the boss and spend 1 stamina, like a regular move, going from here to his side and then to the back side, and then you can circle around him. But that's a move as if you would be moving to another node. And then there's other things like, let's say, if I'm standing here, this card says move 1 closer to the next character, which would be me. So there you turn the boss towards the next node that is closer to the guy you want to go to. So essentially, this guarantees that those 4 zones always align with the grid around them. And then he moves 1 forward, and in this case, he would attack everything to his sides and to the front, and his weak spot would be in his back. Doing that, and that's how the bosses work. You go through these cards, and then they stay in that order. So they will always go and repeat their behavior. So if you get the hang of it, you can predict what the boss is going to do next. Position yourself, and then maybe strike at the weak spot. Well, that is partially true because bosses also have something that is called a heat value. That is the amount of life that if the boss gets down to that, something terrible happens. You have these heat cards, which are stronger attacks, and pick 1 at random out of that. Put it into the deck of the 4 cards you already have, shuffle them, so now the pattern is screwed up, and probably you are screwed up through that. And also in this case, he gets a special ability saying, flying high, after heat up, characters in Gargoyles node must spend +1 stamina to attack because he's flying around and making attacks more expensive. As you already saw, even though I made a really, really masterful attack roll there, I barely scratched the gargoyle, and that shows you that you really need to get up a bit of better loot and better equipment in order to take on this guy. And if you beat him, you get some souls in regards to the sparks you have left there. And then you set up 4 new areas, pick the the card of the main boss you want to fight, which will tell you which encounter cards are on there. You essentially set up the entire game anew, except for you leave the equipment you already have and the souls or you already have there. On the bright side, you get some loot from defeating the boss, some better equipment there that is specifically themed. So in his case, you get his tail axe. And can try to use that if you have the correct stats. There's also some random good legendary loot, which will then get shuffled into the treasure deck, as well as upgraded versions of...
I'm just playing with the cubes, the dice.
Upgraded versions of your class equipment, which I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but if you pick a class, there's 5 cards that are kind of pretty good equipments for your class that get shuffled into the deck. So the deck has the common treasure cards and the base class cards that you bring for your class, even though there's no such thing as a class, but everybody can use the cards you're adding to the deck. But it's, let's say, it's more likely that you will wear them depending on the stats that you have. But you can always mix and match. And then when you finish with the main boss, as I said, the main boss has a bigger playing field. That is for once because the boss is either moving a lot, or in case of the other boss, Execution Smog and Dragon Slayer Ornstein, where you are actually fighting 2 boss models at the same time. And you will need the space to move around. Otherwise, all the encounters just happen in a single room. You can either play this as a one-off, so you decide which mini-boss to take on, then decide which main boss to take on, and then that's the round that you've played. Or you can play a campaign version where it essentially gives you a list of encounters that you want to do that are roughly... close to what Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3, the video games, are presenting you with in terms of enemies. There's a quite good amount of minis in here before I'm throwing away the Schachtel, which is your German...
The box.
The German that's not the week. So there's... let's see.
No, stay with that camera until whatever is easier for you.
So there's some base guys. We have our Dragon Slayer. Then there's a couple of boss models in here. And you have Smog is one of the major bosses. The Dancer of the Boreal Valley is the other main boss. And the other ones, the Titanite Demon, the Winged Knight, and the Boreal Knight, I think it's... was called
Boreal Outrider Knight.
Are all other mini bosses. I think that's pretty much it. I think you got the majority of stuff that can be told about the game.
So we can move into the next section, likes and dislikes. Do you want to keep going, or do you want me to?
I'll have a tea. I think it's. To give you an idea where we are coming from, and because that's also, I think, a reason why we'll go after Sarah is...
Because I'm telling the bad.
is that I've played, I think, all the Souls games. Yeah. And I very much like that series. So I'm coming from kind of an angle, also looking at this as how close is this to what they try to accomplish with having the feel of the video game. And Sarah, I think, goes at this as a entire...
I'm a board gamer. I said it so many times. The only thing you can make me do that is... a computer game in some way is either a match 3 game like Fishdom, which I play every day, or Bejeweled, or Fairway Solitaire, things like Quirkle, or hidden object games. That's all. Anything else? I'm a noob, and I'm not really interested in playing.
And digital board games like Quirkle?
Yeah, like I said. It's the Quirkle.
Okay.
Anyway.
Please.
So, this is where I'm coming from. Now, let's start with the good. They told me in management school that I have to say something nice first before I criticize. So here's a few things.
You got to sandwich it. You have to say...
No, you are the second part of the sandwich. You will come at the bottom half with something good.
Then we should have planned this better.
Let's start with what I really love. I do like the quality and the artwork of the game. That he's showing, especially the models, true. But very quickly, that part here, that stat part is what I like most about the getting better grinding, kind of grinding through treasures and stuff. I like that best, that you can up your stats and there's a few things that are easier for your character and a few things that are really not that easy. For example, I'm really dumb, but I'm really good at believing things. So I'm pretty much the clergy of the troops. I have great faith and some strength, but I'm not really good at intelligence. But the weapons or the... spells or magical items that I'm really good at carrying are I'm sorry, I'm giggling. They're working super well with the special abilities that I have, like being the supporter, the healer, and healing stamina or more stamina per turn also for other characters. So I like that about you go through the dungeon and you look through the treasures, what is best for you to get better before you encounter the boss. I do like the boss fights, no matter if it's a small boss or one of those major dudes. I really like that encounter. It's pretty much... it pretty much is the part that makes the game for me. So on the way there, he doesn't like the dude with the toothpick, and I don't know why. Don't distract me. On the way there, you're not only crawling through or going through a dungeon or scenario and trying to kill all the monsters before you can get to your loot and get better. But the thing that I find borderline boring is you have to go through the same dungeon at least twice before you have enough loot that you could actually have a chance at beating either the mini boss or the big boss. And since you do not change up the cards of the encounters that you're gonna have in the room, yes, it's predictable, which is okay, but it is, excuse my French, fucking boring. So sometimes when you're really bad at rolling dice, which kind of happens once in a while, at least with me, you have to go through a third time before you can encounter the mini boss. And believe me, at that point is the point where I personally say, we're gonna pack the game away now, or we find a way to change that up. And lucky for us, there were ways to do that. He's gonna talk about them.
Moment.
Right now.
One moment, please. I need to really...
Don't make the Merkel. Don't do the Raute.
Dark Souls is a game for 1 to 4 players.
Oh, yeah.
Age 14 and up.
And now I have to look away because otherwise I laugh really hard.
The box says something about 90 to 120 minutes.
Microsoft minutes.
I'm biting really hard on my lip.
Mm-hmm. Don't hurt yourself. That's maybe setup time. I don't know if they...
I mean, Yeah, maybe if you're only playing if you just count the time for the first mini boss kind of thing.
But not even then.
And
If you don't play with the changed up rules.
Yeah.
So it's Microsoft Minutes. But changed up rules, that's what I said. In the description box below, there will be a link to the exact part of Board Game Geek where the alternative rules are written down that might help you speed up your own game. That actually saved the game for me.
Yeah, there's... I think the designer, one of the designers, mentioned that you can speed up the game by using a variant that is essentially double the amount of souls you're earning and half the amount of sparks you have to complete the game. Which we didn't even bother with. We went with a variant, user submitted variant that's on BGG that it gets a little bit closer and that felt pretty good. So that's you have to send me the link later so that I can put it into the description box. But before we played with the let's say revised rules, I was at the point to say this is gonna go to the box of board games in our shelf that I'm not gonna play again. Not because it is horrible, but the grinding through the item deck is inefficient, takes too long, too luck based on what you might draw with your first 100 souls. And I understand from the video game that this reset, respawn, grind through is quite okay to play and you're only pissed off at some point way later. But with a board game, I don't think it translates well into a board game. I want to hit that point.
Yeah, it's boring. It is slow as hell. It is boring. It's frustrating. And it is at one point, and it might be that this point is very early or way earlier for me than it is for other people. I'm not saying that could not be. But I feel like, what was that movie with the so many days and he relives the same days? What was it called?
Groundhog Day?
Groundhog Day. It felt like Groundhog Day for me. It's like, how long are we in there? I mean, I love spending time with him on date night, but I would enjoy 4 hours or 5 hours of spending board gaming together if you feel like you're moving forward through a dungeon. Once we came to the mini boss and to the big boss, and we got the equipment that were, well, equipping us in a way that we at least had a chance for the bosses. I really liked it. It's very enjoyable. It's, you beat the heck out of a couple of monsters and then you really duck behind your shield super fast and say, and make defense rolls and hope that you don't have the Wheaton disease at that point. But yeah, the way to the bosses, if we didn't apply the shortcut, I would have dozed off.
There's
Sorry.
And there's I think there's multiple things that come together that which make it is specific or especially bad. For one, playing more than twice through the regular trash mob encounters, and pardon my MMO parlance, but that's what it is. You're just you're grinding through 4 encounters of trash mobs once, twice. And everything more than that is just, okay, we know exactly what's going to happen in what order, which and then it just becomes everybody knows what they got to do. And at that point, hopefully you have weapons good enough that even the die roll isn't changing that much either on the outcome. So... and that is also the maximum amount I'm willing to spend time with these rather simplistic base monsters. Also, the game would great, or I hope when some of the expansions are coming out that there's a little bit more variety with the enemies you can find in the areas.
You mean like the small?
Yeah,
Okay.
Just having a greater variety of trash mobs, because you've seen 3 of let's see 4, 5, 6 trash mobs.
So half of it.
So there's not that much going to change, and 2 of them, 2 of those 6 are big ones that usually only show up alone or in the higher difficulty encounters with some smaller guys in there, but they're not super interesting. They just are kind of bullet sponges, so have a lot of health and take that.
So you gotta fire twice to kill them instead of once.
No, the short version of what I think about this game is I totally agree with what Sarah said, and that I at first thought, man, there's something here, but it's so unenjoyable. It's just boring trying to sit through these, and then finally you get to the boss, and then actually the mechanics of the boss is the more interesting thing. The loot isn't interesting
at all
really in this. Sometimes it's like, yeah, that's the thing with the one blue die more than the other thing, but it's not. Don't expect. I mean, this is what the card says. There's no story to this thing, and this is kind of a thing for if you've played the video game where every item has a bit of lore attached to it, and that's the main one of the main ways how the lore is built up in the video game. Speaking of the video game, that you may skip if you don't care about this, but I think they just got the wrong things from what makes the Dark Souls video game great. First and foremost, in Dark Souls is almost a game where luck is close to non-important. It's all about your physical skill of playing that, trying to figure out what do the enemies do, which is something actually this game does get with the behavior cards. They have predictable behavior, and once you've learned that behavior, it becomes easier, which is true. And actually this game models that to a fault, and that's why these trash mob encounters become so boring, because they are not that great, or they're not as interesting as enemies. And once you figure them out and have equipment to hit them hard enough to kill them, there's not much of planning or things you do except for the same thing over and over.
And even more, I just want to insert that observation in here. When we play with 4 players, at that point that you are leveled, it is quite likely that the 4th player on that turn is not doing anything. So
once it's
like you skip a turn.
Yeah.
Which might be nice when you're really bad with rolling dice, or I don't know, you gotta pee every 5 minutes and gotta leave the table. That's cool. Otherwise, it is quite boring again. And now you can go back to...
Yeah, and then that is ideally the way. Okay, this is the way I enjoy playing Dark Souls, but I think that is the core which makes that series appealing. You have to get better yourself, not your character. You're not leveling up. If you are hitting a wall and can't progress, you have the option to grind your way through and kill enemies, farm souls, and increase your stats to get better, which here, happens sort of through the equipment you get. The stats actually have no effect on what you're doing. But the grinding and then just powering through because you have armor and weapons that do a lot of damage, that's not really why Dark Souls, the video game, is enjoyable. And that here, I mean, it's enjoyable the first time when that stupid guy who's always hitting me with his bow from the other side of Anor Londo, if you can just go up there and really smack him in the face and make him fall down. That is enjoyable once.
Maybe twice,
maybe,
but then
maybe twice, but that's not
you're dozing off after that.
what you want. And here you only really get that from the boss encounters, because they are a little bit more complex. They're a bit more randomized. Positioning is more emphasized with the boss space and where you are and what you want to do. But yeah, there's certainly, I don't want to speak for everybody who's played the video game, but I think the appeal is not the grind for souls and then run against it. Also, if you want to do that, then do it properly, because the video game has no concept of the sparks. You don't get 2 tries to grind and then you have to restart the game. That's kind of the other thing, that if you want to make it so that grinding is a viable way and is possible, then remove the limit to the sparks. Yes, you might have a failure condition, and that is also something mentioned in that variant thread where they just got rid of it and just use it as a counter and then try or use that to keep score, which actually makes this also more enjoyable for me, knowing that it only took that many tries.
Yeah. Question is, how are the items that you find are handled in the video game? Because I hated the item deck, other way around. I don't hate the item deck, but it is so big and so random that it happened more than once. So it's quite likely that for the first 2 rooms, you don't get any weapon that you could either carry soon-ish, or a shield or anything, just those stupid stones and a few things that were so expensive that you could maybe, just before you encounter the boss, you could buy a card. So how did the video game do that?
It's very different. I mean, in the video game, you have known locations for items where you can find them. Meaning that you have a specific spot in the area where you could do them. They could have done something similar here, saying that here's a loot deck from stuff you can draw by defeating this type of enemy, or maybe
or here's a spot where you find that axe or that bow, and here is some extra funny stuff if you want to spend souls on them to just have the upgrades there,
or the other way around, have a shop. Getting a randomized assortment of cards. There are enough cards in there to have a randomized assortment of still good weapons. They could have tiered them. Actually, they did that with a legendary loot. They could have gone and just said, well, compile a store deck out of this is a deck for tier 1 weapons, tier 2 weapons, and then the same for upgrades or equipment, and you have a little bit more control. With this, you might be laughing, but
it wasn't funny for us.
But it happened that the first 10 cards we drew were upgrade cards, which are inherently useless, especially at the beginning of the game, and then you could say, well, that's just bad luck, but that's also not Dark Souls.
And it also happened more than once, and we shuffled really, really well. And it not only happened to us. I mean, so there's no specific curse in this house for her item decks.
Bad draws can always happen, but it's. I think this is not the game to have that kind of wall there to be frustrating, especially compared with the grind. And that's kind of like the grinding through the trash mobs, which is uninteresting for more than maybe 2 times. It would be a strike for me. The item deck is not really that great. That goes hand in hand. Since you have to sift through that entire treasure deck until you find weapons that you can either equip, or B, are useful, or C, both. That's where you spend your majority of souls on, and that's why you have to grind through these encounters, which led us to changing that. I mean, we can talk about a little bit about that in the experiences part. Just saying that it's quite annoying. Either having them pre-sorted would solve that, or having an easier way, like draw multiple cards and pick one, or actually trying to avoid the here's your luck. That's. I don't really associate the Souls series with just blind luck, either in drops nor in the die rolling things. I understand that there has to be a game aspect here in Dark Souls, where some things have to be uncertain unless you're playing with fully committed resources, and then it's just a puzzle and has no game luck aspect anymore.
But there's still dice, and
I'm fine with the dice,
and that is always the luck factor. So even if you're very likely good equipped by turn 3, you still, and again, something for experiences, there is still enough luck with those dice.
And then there's some smaller parts, which all of these we house rule them, but you can probably too. But some smaller parts are the boss encounters. You always have to go through almost all of the encounters. Maybe depending on how you set it up, you can skip one, but if you just happen to need, let's say, instead of 8 basic encounters for soul farming, you want to do 9. Nope, you will do at least 11 to get back to the boss, because you need to get to that door. So that would be something where actually the video game recognized this and introduced shortcuts that you can take. Once you mastered that, you are able to just bypass this and maybe have just one encounter and be able to go directly to the boss or something like that. And then other things I'm getting really nitpicky, but it's like you have for all these things on the boards, these little tokens that you flip over if you use them, except for the Ember Shard, which is the same on both sides, and you either have it on the board or you put it next to the board. They could have easily just done the exact same thing of have it, flip it over, and then...
the whole game, and I'm going to let you talk about the manual. I just heard him sigh a lot. But the whole game feels like somebody had a lot of enthusiasm, a broad understanding of how to put together a board game, but then stumbled heavily 2/3 into the development/production phase. And that is the point where you start playtesting, where you get very brutal and honest opinion back, and where you just work on the kinks, and also the very small ones, being tokens and stuff. If things like that are taken care of, it just makes the whole experience of gaming so harmonic and wonderful and round that the player then will very likely have your game on the table again and again and again, especially if it comes with a known, I don't know if it's a real franchise thing or just a known series, Dark Souls,
it's,
that you recognize it from video games or, I don't know, t-shirts, comics, whatever, how far this spread, but it then brings them, if they love the series or whatever, they come to the board game and have a wonderful experience instead of being disappointed. Actually,
I agree mostly, but this
is so cool. But it's just here and there. There's awesomeness, and then it just falls apart in other sections.
I'm pretty sure they had this exact thing in mind, because this is the screen you see in the video game when you die, where it says you died. And
it's funny. You open up the box and you giggle.
But that's not the core of the game. The other thing they could have pursued would have been the lore, which is you have these very fantastical, kind of weird but medieval fantasy-like worlds. You find tidbits of story that come together and then form something. That is something Seven Continent really does well with here's a little nugget of text that sparks your fantasy in trying to figure out what's going on here without revealing too much. It's all a little bit weird, and this is also in the video game of Dark Souls. It's almost entirely absent from this one, which I can understand if you're saying, okay, we're making a board game here, we don't want to tell a story. That's fine. But then they should have more focused maybe on the skill-based thing. And there is the thing that gets closest to that are the boss encounters, which is also the thing that is, I think, the saving grace, where it's so good that I could play this as a boss rush game only, entirely skip the trash mob encounters, or have something like 1 or 2 of them, maybe to get warm or warm up. And then
have 2 rooms with the mob, have a mini boss, 2 more rooms with the mob, a big boss. Would be perfect for me to compress it down to that.
And I was actually going into Dark Souls. I was really anticipating that, not only because I like the video game, but because all the promotional stuff I've seen up front very much made it look like this to be the streamlined version of what Kingdom Death is.
And we really like Kingdom Death
with a long running campaign, and there's Kingdom Death also has its own share of issues when it comes to the luck of the die roll and being very punishing, and also losing the campaign, which may go over multiple games. But it's Dark Souls is not that much different, and actually it's not that much streamlined. It's just it's a little bit well, I don't want to say dulled down, but it is. Here, the boss have like 4 behavior cards versus the AI deck in Kingdom Death.
Yeah, but here you have to work with the smaller dudes before you get to the boss. In Kingdom Death, you just have the lion, for example.
Yeah, you also have smaller dudes.
So does it say no power for camera or for
battery 10%?
That's the iPad. Let me get the cable.
And those were our little battery excursions. What I was about to say is Kingdom Death has way more interesting and way more broader boss encounters, but also has some smaller guys that you can fight against.
Yeah.
But it's just... Yeah,
the ratio between small guys and boss is way better and balanced, I think, in Kingdom Death than it is here.
You could make the comparison maybe so far in saying that they solved this initial, let's say, 8 encounters with the trash mobs by just having this hunt phase where you draw cards. And it's a very unfair comparison because those are different games, but I mean.
They tickle the same.
The thing is, Kingdom Death for me fulfills the lore part that I would have hoped to get out of this, as well as the interesting boss battles. I mean,
yes,
I think what I want to say here is I really like the AI behavior deck mechanic in games. And it's still good in Dark Souls besides the rest, which is very...
It's good enough for us to think about how to put in shortcuts and have a boss rush, like you said earlier.
It's good enough in that we spent time looking for how to change the game to be enjoyable. Which is...
and that link down in the description was a godsend. It's changed a few very important things, and personally for me the most important thing was that we upped the amount of souls that we got, that we were getting souls for selling cards later on. So everything around the item deck, I didn't care about the spark too much, but the item deck change there was it was essential for me to have this game on the table.
We pretty much ignored the sparks, although we actually, when we played it with those changed rules, with the changed souls, we I think never would have gotten we would have never lost the game as in totally.
No, we wouldn't. But again, now with the things that we implemented, the game is definitely playable for me.
Yeah,
and the boss fights are very enjoyable for me. But we
still need to rate.
Yeah, exactly. And that is my intro to the rating. Though this is now a good game for me with all the changes that we made, this is not the purpose of a good game. Having to house rule and change so much that you actually change the whole flow of the game. And now I have to ask you, what am I rating?
We are going to rate the base game as the rules.
With the rules as they came.
Sarah,
okay.
I just want to mention that quickly because you said the word manual.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I've had worse, but I've also had a lot better. It's just it's a mixed bag, as they say. I don't want to go on too negatively about the entire thing, but it has a strange organization where it's here's how the game is played, here's setup, then here's more rules how the game is played. By the way, if you're just one player here in that paragraph, there's a different setup rule for you, which is like.
Would have been smarter to put it to the point set up instead of somewhere hidden.
It's I mean, it's certainly not the only game that is guilty of hiding important information in big paragraphs of text. But here, if you are reading the manual, I can only strongly recommend to read it fully and not just go by, hey, let's start the game and then we can pick up the rules, whatever we want. And so it's not really that great in that aspect. I mean, it has, and I think except for one or two little things, all the information in there. And for the other things, I think there was an errata or there are some questions answered on the various Board Game Geek boards. I kind of lost overview of that because I've been reading up on so many different things that you can do.
And since we've been house ruling now, we don't really.
So we are going to rate the game as is, as it is.
Without any.
Played,
okay. Okay. 1, 2, 3. The boss fight and the minis are gorgeous. They get 1 point.
Yes.
And then and it's such a shame for all of that to just fall apart.
I think the thing that really kills it for me is not only the grinding, but the part where you realize to play this game even successfully, you're sitting down for maybe 4 hours. And if you're not sitting down for 4 hours, you're probably not going to win. So you have to repeat from day one again, grinding. So you are spending all your time fighting the same trash mobs that are still not changing anything they're doing, which, as I said, is good in a video game when it tries to teach you something, the player, about them, how to beat them. However, they are not easier to beat in here because they're only easier to beat in here if you have better equipment. There's a reason why the Dark Souls video games has no equip runs or guys that are just running without armor, just the cheapest weapon they can get and still beat the game because they are just good in dodging and timing and knowing patterns and all that. And this here forces you to do the grind, which means it forces us to waste our time, which is why it's getting that harsh of I mean, we are going into funny stories and experiences now, and I can tell you a bit about how long we took with the game. So the first game we ever played, we played according to the rules. The night before we played, you had looked at the manual, had set up the game and separated things, looked through things, and already had said, this is going to be a long one. So, okay, I'm going into the mindset of I'm going to be at the table for 2-3 hours, and it's going to be one of those brain melting games. I didn't expect
simple mechanics, but you're just waiting for shit to come round.
I wasn't fast enough. I had a magnificent pun.
Oh, sorry. Put it in.
No, it's not. It's gone.
Oh, come on. I want to know it.
The moment has passed, but when you said it's going to be a long one, I was about...
Oh! Hold on. Where's the tail? So, yeah, so it all runs long in my brain, that joke. So, we sat down and I came to the table with the most patient mood that I could ever bring to the table. And still at the end, I didn't rush you. I didn't sigh heavily. I was not frustrated. I was not at one point, though I felt like that because we had to figure out the game and we had to, run through.
Kind of, because I clearly remember the first time we played, at some point we said...
That was at the 3-hour mark.
Yeah.
And that was at the point where... in my mind, it was either we do something really wrong, and that is why it takes us so long to get the equipment and stuff, or the game is broken that way. And that is always a point where I'm getting frustrated and I'm losing patience quicker than you can say Indiana Jones.
I want to point out 3-hour mark of the mini boss.
Yeah.
We're still not beyond the first encounter. And then given... you check on rules, you have questions, everything takes a little bit longer. Yeah, but still
you should be 2.5 hours.
But if you're playing this by the book, meaning you really play out every encounter, that's kind of where we end up with saying then after the second time, if we want to go through this, we will just award us the souls for the rooms because we
can count.
We've
been there twice. We don't need a third time.
There's maybe the only thing that could change is in which order the players start. But even that is then at that point usually not that...
With 2 people, not that much of a difference. So that was a Wednesday date night. We like to test new games. And then we had said, we were actually questioning because we had thought, we bring it to the table for the group on Sunday then, see how it plays with more people. And we were questioning at this point, like, should we? Or we were so disappointed and my patient, almost lethargic at this point, kind of patient man went to the web and researched and came across, you can be lively now, came across the rules. Again, it's in the description box below to change it up. So what we decided is give that a try on Sunday with a group, have 4 players try the pretty much shortened and ramped up kind of soul distribution. And there it was that we got to some decent equipment in a very nice amount of time. We still struggled with the luck with the dice. That made no difference, and that's fine. And
we still played 2 hours?
We played 2 hours and I think it was 10 or 15 minutes. We just overstepped the 2-hour mark. And there it also happened that we died once. And once we had reset, it was very quickly that the 4th player always was sitting at the table doing nothing, because then the others were decently equipped, not overpowered at all. But then we could take down either the mob thing or also the mini boss quite fast. The mini boss, everybody, the 4 of us, everybody got to poke him once and he was gone. With the mob, the 4th one hadn't sit out, had an empty turn. So after that experience, we were definitely in the mood to put it on the table again and try for Big Boss. And that is what we did this week on Wednesday. And I have to say, aside from the...
we played a full game. So
we played a full game, and that was 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Including setup, though.
Which is, and then
that's decent.
getting more into that, and that is exactly the amount of time, maybe a bit more that I'm willing to spend with a game of that sort without...
Yeah, but it wasn't borderline for me. The only thing that was borderline still for me was we were well equipped at one point, and the only thing that... So I had a two-handed weapon, and I had one of those shields that you could still, like with a third imaginary arm, I could carry that. And my armor was great. I had 2 spells that were awesome. And the only thing that I could carry or would like to have just to be a bit more strong on the defense was an upgrade for the armor. And we were like, that's about halfway through the item deck. And then we just went through the whole of the item deck. There were no more upgrades, and you cannot reshuffle the I deck and have a chance at the upgrades. Well, you could. House rules, you know. You
can. So maybe I should say a word or two to those rules we always refer to. So one being the amount of souls you gain for beating an encounter. That's what's in the link down, which gives you just a slightly higher amount of souls, which is great because that's speeding up in the most part of the game. The other thing they did was the suggestion of take the spark count and throw it out of the window, or just use it to count how often you failed, because then you will always have at least an enjoyable kind of climax to the game, which I totally agree with. This is the early parts of the game are not interesting, and just playing them and losing in that part and then being forced to play it again does not make a good game in this case. It's just... it's not for me then. Nope. That's my point. But the other thing we did at some point just to accelerate the how to get to items is that we added a rule where we can sell 2 equipment cards for 1 soul, but then
they were out of the game.
Exile the cards, which is just a fancy way of saying, well, half of the equipment deck would have sufficed to do that. Yeah. And I think there's some suggestions to that. I don't want to just split the equipment deck in half, because then you could end up with even more upgrade cards and even less cards to put them in.
Exactly. You need to have a good ratio of a bit of everything.
I haven't tried any of the suggestions that have you set up like a store deck where you draw cards from that, or where you draft cards. Anything that makes this the treasure cards more enjoyable, I think, is a good solution.
Yeah.
There, and maybe if you want to give it a try, I think what I would prefer would be a store deck that sorts the cards into categories, so that you at least know you're getting a weapon, or at least you know you're getting an upgrade, and then
But that was the only thing that I was a little bit miffed with at the last game. Everything else, totally fine. Perfect length of time
we fought Smog and Ornstein.
Yes.
And I'm saying Ornstein, although it's Ornstein, because we are German. We know how to say Ornstein.
With O? Ohren? So ears, or the Earstein?
Ornstein. Der Herr Ornstein.
Bitte zum Diktat.
Drachenschlechter Ornstein.
Dragon Slayer Ornstein. So, but everything else, I didn't... with just the 2 of us, we had enough to do with the mob, so it didn't feel... super grindy. I'm gonna go to that again. So that was fine. We played 2 mob sessions. So once through all of the 4 rooms, mini boss, 4 rooms, big boss, and that was 2.5 hours, and it was enjoyable. We still cursed a lot at the dice because
I think we did the initial encounters twice. But that as I said, that's my high mark for. I'm fine with redoing the early encounters, because the initial encounters are still dangerous if you don't have equipment, which makes them interesting. But as soon as you have beaten them once, you can almost skip them.
Yeah. So these 4 dice are the dodge dice, as you remember. And Hubby, with his rolling around, was just as well dodging things as the warrior
I'm
is.
really good in rolling 4 blanks.
So he upgraded to 4 dice, which is usually quite the good chance to roll at least 1 dodge token. It so happens that Daniel showed that he has a very special ability, which is gracefully rolling 4 blanks more than once. Which is like, wow. So he gets mad so fast at that. If because, well, you can re-roll, but the next time, and it's very likely that the next time comes up, there's no, you're blanking again. I did blank a couple of times with the black dice. I didn't really dodge, but I never rolled bad with the orange or the blue. Only the black sometimes, but not as bad. This time it seems he had the Wheaton's disease and I was on the mend or something. But yeah, that's what I threw. We actually play with this dice tray here. My special ability was to roll the dice and then have them jump
missing the dice tray
over the wall and then scatter them. And he's looking at me like, do you want me to have a wall that is 30 centimeters high in there? Funny thing also, the time that we played with the big group, it's definitely genetic, because one of our friends who's related, he did the same thing. He also threw it across the dice tray, and he was like, what the heck? What do you want me to do to have it in the dice tray? So we giggled a lot, and also we decided that because you were so great with your assassin at the 4-player game, we had a lot of laughs because we thought you'd bring the iron hand thing from the time story.
Grandma's iron hand.
You go. He was really good at rolling dice that particular day. So
it's only super effective against demons.
Yes, I know. Going grandma through the dungeon left and right. Woohoo! I'm here.
See, we have even Dark Souls spiders are attacking now.
Where?
There's this tiny spider just right down here.
Oh.
That's
undead spider. Dead spider, actually.
Did you just put this spider into your teacup?
No, it's empty. I'm just gonna have it in the sink to wash.
Obviously, we will now get some very interesting comments to animal rights. And
spiders have no rights in our house. They have the right to leave. Fast. So, but I think these were all the funny story was the grandma.
I'm done with thoughts. Yes.
Yes.
I feel bad when we have one of these episodes where we are going like
we're crushing.
We really didn't like this.
But the thing is, it's not that we didn't like it from the start. We really tried to like it, and that is the worst. Disappointing feeling when you really try to like something a lot and it's just not happening.
I also think it's the expectations were high for me in this case, for one being because I like the video game, and for second because I was actually hoping that this is a fast to play kind of version of Kingdom Death or that mechanic, which I stand with is more games that have this tactical combat combined with some AI deck behavior cards.
So, well, I didn't have any expectations because I couldn't even remember if you played it. Usually, or I remember very many games that he plays because, well, I look at his screen once in a while and like once a day, and I admire the artwork in the games and stuff like that. So, but I didn't remember this game, so no expectations for me. But still, very disappointed that, yeah, it's not a streamlined Kingdom Death.
But there's hope. So
yes.
Even we found a way to make this enjoyable, even though and that's why it got a little bit more down the thumb. That's not what a game should be, or that's not what you should do. But I think that what is in here at its core is good enough to give it a chance. And then maybe work it out in a way where it's enjoyable. It could also be that if they come up with the expansions, there's a little bit more variety in the trash mobs there, more interesting bosses.
It's a flash mob, not a trash mob.
I wouldn't be surprised if they come up with, hey, here's some rule changes to speed things up that are a little bit more elaborate than the half the sparks, double the souls thing. Which might also work. I mean, I think the design aim here was to make it difficult, and they, I think, confused the difficult with tedious in some way.
Yes. Well, we're gonna go now. We rambled and ranted and explained enough. We hope you have a great rest of the weekend. If you want to leave us your thoughts or have questions, leave them either in the comment section below or on the thread for this video on Board Game Geek. You can contact us there, no problem at all. There's also many other social media sites where you can connect with us, so feel free. They're all in the description box below. And we're going to be back next Sunday with a new game. It's the last weekend of September. We're getting to October fast, honey.
Spiel is coming up.
Yes. So take good care, have fun, give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe if you're new and want to see us again, and put jumper. Now we're going to say goodbye.
You said thumbs up.
Yeah, but you have to do that on the video on Sunday. Say goodbye. Come on, the video is long enough.
Goodbye.
And I have to edit tonight because tomorrow's Rock Band. And I cannot work on Rock Band.
You die.
You die.